Genesis 15 verse 1. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. God reassures Abram of his protection and blessing. Genesis 15 verse 2. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? Abram expresses concern about his lack of an heir. Genesis 15 verse 3. And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Abram fears that Eliezer of Damascus will inherit his wealth. Genesis 15 verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. God promises Abram a biological son. Genesis 15 verse 5. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. God illustrates the vastness of Abram's future descendants. Genesis 15 verse 6. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Abram's faith is acknowledged as righteousness by God. Genesis 15 verse 7. He also said to him, I am the Lord, who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. God reaffirms his covenant with Abram. Genesis 15 verse 8. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? Abram seeks confirmation of the promise. Genesis 15 verse 9. So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. God initiates a covenant ritual. Genesis 15 verse 10. Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. Abram prepares the covenant sacrifice as instructed. Genesis 15 verse 11. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. Abram protects the sacrifice, symbolizing his commitment. Genesis 15 verse 12. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Abram enters a visionary state. Genesis 15 verse 13. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own. God reveals the future enslavement of Abram's descendants in Egypt. Genesis 15 verse 14. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. God promises deliverance and restoration. Genesis 15 verse 15. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. God assures Abram of a peaceful death. Genesis 15 verse 16. In the fourth generation your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. God speaks of his divine timing for judgment. Genesis 15 verse 17. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. This signifies God's presence and his commitment to the covenant. Genesis 15 verse 18. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates. God formalizes his promise of land to Abram's descendants. Genesis 15 verses 19 to 21. The land of the Kenite, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephates, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. The covenant specifies the territories included in God's promise.